Okay,
Thank you.
ready to go.
Great.
Well, then
Thank you,
here.
everybody. We're live now. This is Dan Prickett, and I want to call to order the special call meeting of the Ways and Means Committee of February 2nd, 2021. Petra Reynolds, our town clerk, will take roll. Petra?
Mr. Prickett,
Here.
Mayor Labriola,
Here.
Miss Conley,
Here.
Mr. Moffett,
Here.
Dr. Parker,
Here.
Miss Tillerson, and Miss Schubert.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We have one item of new business, and that's to consider the approval for a change order request from our landscaping contractor who's redoing the parkway on the way to Kiowa. So, Brian, I think our Public Works Manager, Brian Gottschalk's going to present the reason for the changes and the amount requested. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again for accommodating a special call meeting for this. Just to back up real quick, I understand now that we've got some new members that weren't involved in the initial discussion of the landscape design and the process. So I want to kind of back up and apologize for not kind of taking it a little bit more broken down and clearly for people that might not have been as up to date about the process as others. So to back up a little bit, this landscape section, the landscape design is broken up into 4 areas along the 2.1 miles of parkway that we've got. And each area was designated an allocation of funds that were going to be specific to the design that was going into each one of these areas. And in some information that was sent over to you all earlier, basically area 1's budget is $30,000. Area 2's budget is $203,209. Area 3 has a budget of $62,033, and area 4 a total budget of $73,252. And then respectively, the irrigation budget from those totals are $10,000, $60,000, $25,000, and $25,000. So of the total irrigation budget, the contractor Reese had internally pulled aside $50,000 to make all of what he's calling major repairs. So those were going to be inoperable valves and busted main water lines and things like that. So that $50,000 was pulled out internally to make those repairs. The rest of that irrigation budget was going to be dedicated to setting up each one of the areas to accommodate the new layout. That's going to be installing sprinkler heads in this sort of pattern, and then drip irrigation in this sort of pattern to accommodate the plants that were going to be going into these areas. Once the ground was broken, it became more and more evident that there were bigger issues and more issues to the existing irrigation system than one could have known prior to starting the project. Because of this, that $50,000 that had been pulled out internally from the total irrigation budget is exhausted, and there is an additional $40,000 that is needed to complete all of the irrigation work. $40,000 on top of the leftover allocation to get the irrigation system set up appropriately. There were a couple of questions that were posed that we got answers from the contractor. One of them about the personnel and why there was a superintendent and a foreman that were in the change order for the personnel. And the short answer, well, I'll read you exactly what the owner or excuse me, the contractor answered. So the question was, do we need both the superintendent and foreman to be always on site with the laborers, thus logging 140 hours each, along with the laborers' 420 hours? The response from the contractor is over 2 miles of irrigation, and a foreman and superintendent will allow for the crews to be working in a safe and constructive environment in multiple areas at the same time. The second question that we posed to the contractor was kind of lengthy, but originally the allowance for the irrigation of Area 1 was $40,000. However, the approved budget for all of Area 1 was $30,000. This includes irrigation plantings and the main circle cleanup and planting, but did not separate out what new irrigation allowance was. And we asked, are you comfortable with delineating $10,000 from the $30,000 to the irrigation and the remainder of the budget going towards specified plants and traffic circle cleanup? The contractor responded basically, yes, this is an appropriate course of action. He says, I will stand by this irrigation change order as the only irrigation related change order I will ask for, as we feel we have a good grasp on what to expect. So those were the two questions prior to this meeting that we had that hopefully provide sufficient answers for. And I want to open this up for any other questions that may have come along since then at this point.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
So if you look at this 40,000 that they're asking for, and then you go back and look at some of the pictures that were in some of the material that we got about the equipment that was buried and covered in mud and all those kinds of things. Are you and maybe I guess Stephanie too, are you guys satisfied that this is a case really of $40,000 worth of unforeseen irrigation issues rather than an underbidding of the original contract amount?
We are pretty comfortable with that, not only from our own stance, but with the advice given from our landscape architect that has legitimized this request and found that these things were necessary. And there were a lot of this that was unforeseen. So we don't feel like this was an underbid at this point.
And so I guess I had two questions. So if the guy's saying this is the only irrigation change order that he's going to ask for, what happens if in a month he comes back and says, you know, I just wasn't sure. I think I may need a little more. Are we prepared to say, sorry, you've got to finish it with the 40,000 we gave you?
I'm not, I would say, John, that's something that we can't answer, because just like the irrigation, we had no idea of the condition that was in. So it wasn't underbidded. We just didn't know. So what he is doing, and based on the email that he has sent, we're hoping that the rest of the irrigation, 2 miles of irrigation, we're hoping that the other irrigation is not in poor condition so that he does not have to come back and ask for more money. But again, not until we start digging down there to find out what's going on, we're hoping that he doesn't have to come back. But if he does, that would be a discussion that we would have to take up at that time.
I have a follow-up question. Did we look at what would be the cost if we just made a jump patch? That is to say, instead of trying to repair all of this down the line, we just cut in at some point where we knew it was good, laid new irrigation all the way down, and then patched back in at some other spot. Would that have been a cheaper option? And did we explore that?
I don't think that was something that, you know, so by the time we found out the extent of the damages, we were past that point because they were making repairs along the way. So to answer your question, I don't know that we have an exact amount that might have been because it was kind of too late at that point.
So of the 2.5 miles of irrigation run that we've got, how much, Stephanie, to your point just now, how much of that 2.5 miles have we not explored so that we know what, are we only 1.5 miles in and we have another mile to go with potentially unforeseen damages? Or I guess my concern is how much more exposure do we have than the 40,000?
So there have been spot checks. So we've got the irrigation up to this point. Basically through area 2. The superintendent has gone ahead of the work and has done some spot checks, and he has verbally said that he feels comfortable with the remaining irrigation just due to the nature of the layout of it. There's a lot less sprinkler heads. There's more of the drip style irrigation. And that's going to be also what's going in those areas too. So he is comfortable saying that the rest of this is going to be not as severe as what we've seen at this point.
That's correct. He also put it in writing. He basically said that he hopes that this would be the only, I would stand by this irrigation change order. It's the only irrigation related change order I will ask for, as we feel like we have a good grasp on what to expect moving forward based upon what we have experienced. So he's saying that he feels pretty good that we will not have any more change orders regarding irrigation coming forth.
As a follow-up question, does that also mean that we are very comfortable with the landscaping budget and plan, and we don't think that there'll be a change order coming as a result of whatever irrigation changes that he may find going forward, that we may have to change his zone from drip to, sprinkle type thing?
Right. The plan is the planting design has remained constant throughout this. And what they're doing is getting the irrigation system in fully operational conditions so that they can set up each area to the specifications of the design layout. So that was a long way to say there's no anticipated change orders for plantings at this point.
Okay, thank you.
The only potential wouldn't be because of irrigation, Dr. Parker. It could be that from the previous council administration, we had talked about once the planting goes in, if we needed, as the town, if we wanted to add more planting, then we could have a change order, because we've decided that there's areas, for instance, along the realigned bike path that we want to beef up the landscaping there. So it might be not because of any problems with the irrigation, but because we want to add more.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Anybody that's ever renovated a house with a wife knows that those changes can come.
And not to add unnecessary information, but everything, all of our plants were contract grown, meaning they've been growing. So we have all of the plants ready that are going to be installed. So it's just a matter of getting the irrigation system set up, fully operational, before we come in and move these plants that are already growing into the ground.
Okay. Yeah, Mary Ann, did you have a question?
I just wanted to make a comment. I think I mentioned at the beginning of this project, I had experience with a major landscaping redo with an irrigation system. And the problems that you're running into with the irrigation system are not unusual, because a lot of it's underground. You can't see it and you don't know unless the sprinkler heads aren't working or something similar. So while this is certainly additional costs, it's not unusual for this to happen.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mary Ann. I think, Brian, two things I'd ask you going forward. Obviously, it's disappointing. We probably need to work with whoever is going to be the contractor going forward that has to maintain all this to do a better job of inspection and sort of what I'll call, preventative maintenance, so we don't run into some of these problems. And I know all of that can't be solved, but, it clearly looks like not much was done to maintain the system. So it got to be a mess. And then I think the second piece of it, which may be more difficult because it's not this contractor's job, but I think we have to go back to Greenscapes and say, were they doing what they should have been doing to prevent this from happening? That's a bit of a question about their performance, I would say, is a question here. Anyway, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't go forward if this is our best option, because I am getting concerned about the timing. We've
Mhm.
got to have the island looking really good at spring break. You know, and then we've got the golf tournament coming up, so we can't delay this much longer. Other questions for Brian? Yes, Scott.
Just an observation, kind of continuing on that same thing, Brian. I was looking at the pictures before we began the meeting. This stuff this isn't a slow drip. This isn't just a small puncture hole of the line. These things haven't been working for some time.
Right.
So I would really, I mean, not only the kind of, as we had talked about at the retreat, the challenges to the greenery, not only in terms of their maintenance or preventive maintenance to the irrigation system itself, but there wasn't water coming out of those things for quite some time.
That's right.
So I don't know why they didn't bring to somebody's attention in terms of the purpose of that irrigation system was to be, watering plants or
Mhm.
grass or whatever. That just wasn't taking place. So, I think they've dropped the ball kind of on two fronts, not only the maintenance of the system, but at least not even trying to maintain whatever areas were supposedly, being watered. But
Yes, sir.
it speaks to the concerns we would have with the greenery. So, anyway.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions of Brian or comments, concerns? Okay, I'd like a motion to recommend this change order.
Mr. Chairman, this
Yeah.
is a motion to approve. This doesn't get recommended.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I need a motion to approve this change order of 40,000 some odd dollars to our landscaping contractor. Is there a motion?
I so move.
A
Thank you.
second.
Second, Scott, thank you. Any other questions before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Any other business, Stephanie, to come before us?
No, Mr. Chair, we're all good. Thank you.
I need a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
I'm
Thank you.
all in favor of that.
Scott, you're required to come to the next meeting as well, I remind you. All right, seeing a motion, all those in favor?